Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Hong Kong Horror. I'm your narrator, Simon. I hope you all had a great holiday. I apologize if I sound a bit congested today. I got a cold when I was in Hong Kong for Christmas, and I'm still recovering, so hopefully I don't sound too bad for you guys. Let me ask you all a question. Do you believe in fate? In my culture, we talk about Yun Fun, the destiny that binds people together. But what about places? If you find yourself signing the deed to a house that is heavy with yin energy, was it really just a mistake? Or were you called there by something? It forces us to ask the question, is everything that happens to us, even the terrifying things, already predestined? Tonight's story is one that revolves around the concept of fate and destiny. This is a story shared by a man, let's call him Awa. It's a story about a bargain that cost way more than money, and a terrifying realization that time for the spirit world doesn't always flow in a straight line as we know it. If you guys remembered from my older episode called What Happens When You Raise Ghosts for Wealth, you might remember the dangers of unconsecrated statues of deities. I'll expand upon this further in this episode regarding consecrated statues. After the story, as usual, let's break the story down together from a Chinese cultural perspective, and I'll share what I think happened. So turn on the lights, get comfy, and let's dive right into this one. Awa was a practical man. He lived in Hong Kong long enough to know that if a property deal looked too good to be true, there was usually a catch. Usually, that catch was a noisy highway right outside the window, a hidden water leak, or a bad landlord. But sometimes, the catch is something you can't see with your eyes. About 10 years ago, Awa emigrated to Malaysia, but he still kept strong roots in Hong Kong. He returned a few times a year, and on one of those trips, he decided it was time to buy a small place for him to stay when he visited, and eventually for his retirement. Also, he had an adult daughter who still lives in Hong Kong. She recently started working, so rather than having her spend her whole salary on rent, he figured it would be the perfect time to buy a little place now, so that she could use it while he was still in Malaysia. He found a listing in New Territories, tucked away down a single-lane road that wound through the heavy overgrown vegetation, typical of the quieter parts of Saigon. It was an older building, a low-rise, sitting in a valley that seemed to trap the humidity and the shadows of the surrounding banyan trees. The price was absurdly low. When the agent showed him the unit, Awa noticed the building was pretty run down. The white paint on the exterior was peeling like dead skin, revealing the gray concrete bones beneath. The lobby smelled of damp earth and old incense, but the unit itself was spacious. It was on the second floor, a low floor, with a balcony that looked directly down onto a designated parking space outside. Awa stood on that balcony, looking out at the parking spot and the trees in the background. He felt a sudden chill. It was the middle of summer, but the air here was colder. He brushed it off. He was a man of logic. Not being able to resist the low price, he bought the flat. Awa and his family are Buddhist, so the first thing he got for the home was a consecrated statue of Gunyam to watch over and protect everyone inside. Do you guys remember what a consecrated statue of a deity is compared to a non-consecrated one from prior episodes? I'll touch on this again at the end for those of you who do not know, and this is very important. For the first few months, things were fine. Awa returned to Malaysia, leaving the flat to be used by his daughter, Kelly, who worked in Central. Kelly was independent, modern, and didn't believe in old superstitions. She was happy to have her own place, even if the commute was a little longer. But the house began to change her. It started slowly. Kelly, who was usually vibrant and full of energy, began to look pale. When Awa video called her from Malaysia, he noticed dark circles around her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. She complained about always being so tired, a heaviness that settled on her shoulders the moment she unlocked the front door. She figured it was just exhaustion from working. "It's just the stress of the job, Baba," she would say. That, combined with the humidity. The air circulation here is so bad, but it wasn't just the air. Kelly started hearing things. At night, when the silence of the valley pressed against the windows, she would hear shuffling sounds from the living room. It sounded like the sound of someone wearing slippers walking around the house. Kelly would always walk out of her room to check whenever she heard this, and it would stop. but the air would smell faint and sweet, like stale flowers left too long on an altar. Awa grew worried. He decided to fly back to Hong Kong earlier than planned. He told himself he was coming to fix the place up, maybe install a new dehumidifier, but deep down, he felt the father's instinct that something was not quite right. On the night of the incident, the weather was foul. A black rainstorm signal had been hoisted earlier in the day, and though it had lowered to amber, the rain was still hammering against the concrete valley. The heavy downpour drowned out the usual sound of crickets and frogs. It was close to midnight. Awa was in the living room, watching TV, waiting for Kelly to drive home from a late-night shift at work. He was anxious. The road leading to the building was narrow and unlit, treacherous in this weather. He paced the room, the sound of his own footsteps echoing too loudly. He stopped by the sliding glass doors on the balcony and slid them open. The air that rushed in was thick with moisture. He stepped out, gripping the railing, looking down into the darkness of the parking bay below. Two beams of light cut through the rain. It was Kelly's car. Awa let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He watched as the car swung into the tight spot. The headlights illuminated the peeling paint on the wall opposite, casting long, dancing shadows. Kelly turned off the engine. The headlights died. That's when Awa saw him. Standing directly behind Kelly's car, bathed in the red glow of the taillights before they flickered off, was a figure. It was a man. He was tall, standing rigid, completely unbothered by the heavy rain. He wasn't wearing a raincoat or holding an umbrella. He just stood there, staring at the back of Kelly's head through the rear windshield. Awa squinted. Is that a boyfriend? He thought. But why make him wait in the rain? And why was he standing so still like that? It's a tight parking spot. Perhaps Kelly told him to get out to guide her into the spot. Kelly opened the door and made a run for the building entrance. The man didn't move. He didn't follow her. He didn't wave. He just stood there, facing the car, as if he was waiting for something else. A few minutes later, the front door clicked open. Kelly walked in, shaking off her umbrella, shivering. "You're back," Awa said, trying to keep his voice casual. "You're soaking wet." "Yeah, the walk from the car to the lobby is awful," she muttered, kicking off her heels. Awa looked at her, and then looked toward the door. "So, aren't you going to invite him up?" Kelly froze. She looked at her father, confused. "Invite who up?" "Your friend," Awa said, pointing to the balcony. "The man. I saw him standing behind your car when you parked. I assume he's your boyfriend. It's rude to leave him in the rain." The color drained from Kelly's face. "Baba," she whispered. "I drove home alone. There's no one with me. There was no one in the parking lot." Awa felt a cold prickle down his spine. "No, I saw him. Tall, dark clothes. He was standing right at your bumper." Kelly rushed to the balcony and looked down. The rain lashed against the asphalt. There was no one there. "Dad," Kelly said, her voice trembling. "I felt like I'm being watched in the car for weeks. Sometimes I look in the rearview mirror and I think I see a shadow in the back seat. But when I turn around, it's empty." That night, neither of them slept. They sat up in the living room with all the lights on, listening to the rain and watching TV. The next morning, Awa made a call. He didn't know many Sifus or Taoist masters, but he had a good friend. Let's call him Aming. Aming was a devout Buddhist, a serious practitioner who spent his weekends chanting scriptures at temples. He wasn't a professional exorcist, but he had what people called yamyuan. He could see and sense things that most people couldn't. "Aming," Awa said on the phone, his voice desperate. "I think I made a mistake buying this house. Something might be following my daughter." Aming didn't ask any questions. "Give me the address. I'll make some calls. I need to bring backup. I'll bring my junior brother, Mark. We'll come chant the Diamond Sutra for you. It'll help clear the energy." A few days later, Aming and Mark arrived. They parked a car in the same spot Kelly had used. The sun was out, but the valley remained dim. As Aming stepped out of the car, he paused. He looked up at the peeling white paint of the building. He looked at the heavy banyan trees looming over the road. A strange look of confusion crossed his face. He rubbed his temples. As if trying to recall a memory that was just out of reach, Awa met them at the lobby. "Thank you so much for coming," he said, ushering them into the lift. When they entered the apartment, the air was heavy. It felt like walking into a room full of people who had suddenly stopped talking the moment you entered. Aming looked around the living room. He touched the walls. He walked to the balcony and looked down at the parking spot. He turned to look at the hallway leading to the bedrooms. His face went pale. He turned to his junior brother, Mark. "Mark," Aming said quietly, "do you remember the dream I told you about?" Mark looked confused. "The one where we were fighting something?" "No," Aming said. "The one where we came to a house to chant. I told you about it. I dreamt that you and I drove to a secluded building, a white building with peeling paint. We walked into a second-room flat. It smelled exactly like this, like old flowers and damp earth." Aming turned to Awa, his eyes wide. "Awa," Aming said, "I dreamt of this moment exactly 1 year ago, before you even bought this house. In the dream, I saw myself standing right here, chanting for the spirits in this room. In the dream, there was an old woman here, the previous tenant who lived in this unit before you." Awa was stunned. "You dreamt of my house?" "I didn't know it was your house back then," Aming explained. "I just thought it was a random nightmare, but everything is the same. The layout, the view from the balcony. It was a premonition." It seems the spiritual world had arranged this appointment long before the contract was signed. Aming and Mark set up a small altar in the living room. They lit sandalwood incense, the smoke curling into the stagnant air. They began to chant. The sound of the sutras filled the apartment. It was a rhythmic, deep vibration that seemed to penetrate the walls. As they chanted, Aming closed his eyes. He slipped into a meditative state, reaching out with his senses to see what was sharing the space with Awa and Kelly. He saw her, the woman he'd seen before in his dreams from a year ago. Inside the apartment, shuffling through the hallway, was an old lady. She was hunched over. She looked sad, incredibly lonely, but not angry. She was the source of the shuffling sounds. She was the one making the air heavy with her grief. She had died here alone, and in her confusion, she had simply stayed, waiting for family who never came. But then, Aming's mind's eye looked outside. Drifting near the balcony, facing through the glass doors, was a man. He was tall, dark, and emitted a colder, sharper energy. This was the same man that Awa had seen behind the car. He wasn't attached to the house. He was a wanderer, a yawan yeguai, a lonely, wandering spirit from the dark roads outside. He had been attracted to Kelly's low yang energy. He had followed the car home like a stray dog following the scent of weakness. When the chanting finished, the heavy feeling in the room lifted. It was as if a window had opened, letting in a fresh breeze. Awa looked at Aming nervously. "Did it work? Why are they here? We have a Gunyam statue on the shelf. Why didn't she protect us? Why didn't she scare them away?" Aming smiled gently, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Awa," he said, "you watch too many movies. You think gods are bouncers? Do you think Gunyam is there to blast away spirits with laser beams?" Aming pointed to the altar. "Gunyam is the goddess of mercy. Her power is compassion, not violence. When non-malevolent spirits see her light, when they hear us chanting, they aren't scared away. They're drawn to it. They come closer." Awa's eyes widened. "They come closer?" "Yes," Aming said. "The old lady inside. She just wanted to hear the prayers. She wanted comfort. And the man outside, he is lost. He saw the light of your shrine, and he wanted to listen too. They didn't hurt Kelly intentionally, but the dead draw energy from the living. Being close to them constantly made Kelly sick." Aming explained that the chanting had helped them. The old lady had received the merit she needed to move on. The man outside had been guided away from the house. "But the strangest thing," Aming said, packing up his unused incense and bells, "is that the heavens knew this needed to happen. They sent me the invitation in a dream a year ago. You were destined to buy this house, Awa. Not to live in it, but so that we could come here today and free these souls. Awa sold the house a few months later. He made a small profit, but he didn't care about the money. To this day, whenever he visits Hong Kong and drives down a dark, single-lane road in New Territories, he checks his rearview mirror. He checks to make sure that the only things in the back seat are shadows, and that nothing is standing behind the car when he parks. So, that was the story from Awa and the house that was sold by destiny. Now, what do you guys think happened here? Please pause the video here and let me know in the comments below. Alright, now, let's break this down from a cultural perspective, and I'll share what I personally think happened here. There are some very distinct Chinese concepts at play here that turns this from a simple ghost story to something much deeper. First, let's talk about the location of this home and its feng shui. Awa bought a unit on a low floor in a valley surrounded by overgrown banyan trees. In Hong Kong superstition, this is a recipe for disaster. Valleys trap air and moisture, leading to a stagnation of hay, life force. But specifically, banyan trees, if you remember from some of my prior episodes, are culturally known as ghost magnets. Their hanging roots provide shade and shelter, making them favorite gathering spots for yin energy. By living on a low floor in that environment, the daughter, Kelly, was essentially living in a pool of stagnant spiritual energy. But it wasn't just the environment. Living with the ghost of the old lady acted like a slow drain on her energy battery. In Chinese belief, yin energy naturally extinguishes yang energy. Even though the ghost meant no harm, her mere presence was feeding off Kelly's vitality, which is why she was so pale and exhausted. It wasn't just stress, it was a spiritual, parasitic drain. But there is a second layer to this. You might be wondering, if the old lady inside the house was harmless, why did that scary man outside follow Kelly home? It's because of the domino effect of hay depletion. In Chinese metaphysics, a healthy living person is like a furnace burning with yang energy. We actually have a concept called Sanbafo, the three fires. Legends say that there's an invisible flame on your forehead and one on each shoulder. These three fires are your spiritual shield. They naturally repel wandering spirits. However, Kelly had been living with this old lady ghost for months. Even though the old lady meant no harm, she is a being of pure yin energy. Living with her is like sleeping next to a block of ice. Eventually, your body heat gets sucked away. Because Kelly's yang energy was constantly being drained by the house spirit, her three fires were dimming. She was spiritually immunocompromised. This brings us to the wandering spirit, the man outside. In the spirit world, yin attracts yin. Predatory or wandering spirits like that man are drawn to low frequencies. He didn't follow Kelly because she was special. He followed her because her shields were down. He saw a dim, weak light moving through the rain, an easy target to attach to. He might not even want to harm Kelly. He may just be following her because he thinks she could help him. So, the harmless ghost inside the house accidentally made Kelly vulnerable to more predatory and more dangerous entities outside of the house. It's a terrifying chain reaction. I now want to turn our attention to the statue of Gunyam. There's a very common misunderstanding about Gunyam that you may not be aware of. Like many people, Awa assumed that having a statue of Gunyam, the goddess of mercy, would act like a security guard or a ghostbuster for the home. This is a very common misunderstanding. We often treat religious statues like spiritual security cameras or electric fences. We think, if I put a god on a shelf, the ghosts will run away in terror. But in Chinese Buddhism, Gunyam is the bodhisattva of compassion, known in full as Gunsayamposat. Her name literally means the one who perceives the sound of the world. She isn't a warrior god like Guan Yu or demon slayer like Zhonghuai. She doesn't destroy spirits, she helps them. When I say them, I'm referring to suffering spirits and not malicious spirits. The old lady inside the house wasn't a demon. She was just a lonely soul. When Awa set up the shrine, it's possible he turned on a beacon of hope. The spirits didn't flee from the light. They gathered around it, hoping to hear the prayers, the teachings, so they could be relieved of their suffering and move on to reincarnation. So when Awa's friend started chanting the Diamond Sutra in front of the statue. He wasn't performing an exorcism in the Western sense. He wasn't kicking them out. He was performing tudo, a ritual of salvation. He essentially turned the apartment into a spiritual soup kitchen. The old lady ghost and the wandering man didn't flee. They came closer because they were starving for Dharma, the teachings that would allow them to reincarnate. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh my god, if Gunyam acts like a spiritual lighthouse, should I throw my statue away? Am I inviting ghosts into my living room? The short answer is no. You are safe if you understand the difference between worship and ritual, as well as the difference between different types of spirits. In Chinese folklore, not all ghosts are created equal. We generally categorize them into two types. The first type are the malicious spirits, Lai Guai. These are the vengeful spirits, the demons, the things that want to hurt you. To them, a Gunyam statue is like the sun. Her energy is pure, high-frequency righteousness. A being of pure evil cannot stand that light. It burns them. So for the bad guys, Gunyam is a police station. They see her, and they run the other way. Then, there are the suffering spirits, Guwon. These are the spirits like the ones in our story tonight, the lonely old grandmother, or the lost wanderer. These spirits aren't evil per se. They're just sad, confused, and stuck in purgatory. To them, Gunyam isn't a weapon. She is a soup kitchen. They see her light and feel warmth, not pain. They gather around her, hoping for a scrap of mercy or a way out of their suffering. So here's the key to tonight's story. The reason the ghost didn't leave Awa's house, even though there was a statue of Gunyam, is because they weren't monsters. They were just lost. If they had been evil spirits trying to possess Kelly, the Gunyam statue and the chanting would be like acid to them. And because they were just sad, lonely souls, the statue became a comfort zone. So think of it this way. When you put a statue of Gunyam in your home, you're safe from the wolves. But you might occasionally find a lost puppy sleeping on your porch. But this brings us to another point. The statue of the deity needs to be consecrated, and not just an empty vessel. Having a consecrated Gunyam statue in your home is generally very safe. In Feng Shui and Buddhism, her presence creates a field of peace and high vibration. Most wandering spirits avoid this light because it's too intense for them, or they respect the deity too much to cause trouble nearby. She suppresses evil simply by being present. In our story, the problem wasn't the statue itself. The problem was that Awa's friend came in specifically to chant the Diamond Sutra with the intent of salvation, Tudo. Think of it this way. A Gunyam statue is like having a doctor living in your house. Usually, that's great for your health, but if you open the front door and start shouting, free medical checkups for everyone, you're gonna get a line of sick people waiting in your living room. That's what the chanting did. It turned a private shrine into a public clinic. There is also belief that an empty statue, ones that haven't been properly consecrated or opened by a master, is just a hollow vessel. Wandering spirits can sometimes take up residence inside the statue because it's a comfortable container. This is why in Chinese culture, we don't just buy a statue of a god and put it on a shelf. We take it to a temple for Huigong, the opening of light ceremony, to ensure the energy inside is actually the deity and not a squatter. Huigong pretty much invites the deity into the empty statue. Keep your consecrated Gunyam statue. She brings peace. Just be careful about performing advanced rituals or chanting for the dead unless you know exactly what you are doing, or you might find yourself hosting a dinner party for the spirit world. And finally, let's talk about the most chilling part of the story, which for me is not the ghost in the rain, it's the dream. This brings us back to the concept of yunfan. In the West, we might call this serendipity or destiny. In the East, we usually use yunfan to talk about romance, meeting your soulmate against all odds. But in Buddhism and Chinese metaphysics, yunfan is much bigger than love. It's the invisible karmic mechanism that organizes reality. Think about the timeline of our story. Year 0, Aming, the Buddhist friend, dreams about performing a ritual in a specific white house with peeling paint. Year 1, Awa, the dad, buys this exact house. Year 1.5, the haunting happens, and Aming is called in to fulfill the dream. From a Chinese cultural perspective, this series of events is known as Ding Zhou, a fixed number or a predestined event, also known as the bridge theory. The scary realization here is that Awa thought he was the main character. He thought he was buying a retirement home, but from the spirit world's perspective, Awa was just a bridge. The old lady ghost was stuck. She had karma, yango, that needed to be resolved. She needed a specific person with specific skills, Aming, to come and chant for her so she could move on. But Aming had no reason to go to a random valley in Saigon. So the universe used Yun Fun to manipulate Awa. It made him buy the house, it made his daughter sick, all to force a meeting between Aming and the ghost. This redefines how we look at hauntings. Sometimes you aren't being haunted because you are unlucky. You're being haunted because you're the key link to something else. You're the only person who knows the guy who can save the ghost. It suggests that the dream Aming had a year prior wasn't a warning. It was a calendar invite sent by the spirit world. And whether they wanted to or not, everyone showed up to the meeting on time. So, does free will exist? Or are we all just following a script that's pre-written before we even walk onto the stage? So does this mean the old lady ghost was a criminal mastermind? Did she plant a dream in Aming's head and force Awa to sign the deed? Probably not. In Chinese folklore, guan, lonely souls, are usually confused, stuck in a time loop, and not very powerful. They don't have the clarity to plan complex multi-year schemes. So if she didn't plan it, how did it happen? I want to touch on something known as the SOS signal theory. Namely, think of a ghost like a person trapped under a collapsed building. They can't see the rescue team, and they can't plan the logistics of the rescue. All they can do is scream for help. In Buddhism, we call this namely mind power or intent. The old lady wanted to move on. She wanted peace. That desire was so intense that it sent out a spiritual distress signal. The universe heard that signal and started moving pieces around to answer it. This brings us to Tianyi, or Heaven's Will. Think of karma as a giant automated computer program. Its job is to balance the books. So the heavenly algorithm matched them up, and it gave Aming the dream as notification of an upcoming job, and it nudged Awa to buy the house to act as the driver. The ghost didn't plan it. She was just the problem that the universe was trying to solve. But why this ghost? There are so many suffering spirits in the world. Why did this one deserve to be saved? This brings us to the concept of past life debt, Yuntan Zaiju, something we've touched on in prior episodes. Also, why Awa? Why not another buyer? This is the deepest layer. In Chinese beliefs, there are no coincidences. It's very likely that Awa had a past life debt to this old lady. Maybe in a previous life, he owed her money, or he promised to help her, but didn't. Buying her house and paying for the ritual that freed her? That could have been him finally paying off that debt in this current life. I've touched on some of the deeper topics in Chinese folklore today, so I hope it wasn't too confusing and that you all enjoyed it. These concepts can go very deep, but maybe we can cover them in greater details in future episodes if you guys are interested in hearing more about them. Thanks for making it to the end of this video. I'm looking forward to speaking with all of you again next week.